I have a free training out there where I talk about how to align your business with your biology. And I have learned how to create my day to follow the cortisol curve. And so your cortisol is highest in the morning, which is where you're most creative or doing things like this. And then it dips, and then you get a little peak between 4 and 6, and then it goes down. So I've learned how to create specifically, I kind of live and die on my Google Calendar. I put these things in, not just meetings, not just podcasts, not just client calls, but I literally put zone of creation or workflow, or I put these things like, I'm going to go to yoga later today. And I'm going to treat that like a standing appointment as though it's a client and I'm not going to miss it. And I think it's so easy for entrepreneurs to just let everything pile up and not take care of you. And guess what? That's where we go back to the burnout conversation.
Today on the podcast, we had Dr. Mel Krug, and she's from Inspire Co. And just a fascinating discussion really about, wellness, how business owners can combat stress through breathing. And she's going to be a facilitator at our upcoming sauna camp here in Minnesota. So if you're interested in understanding, really getting in touch with yourself as a business owner, as a person, and really understanding how you can combat stressful situations and how you can really empower yourself and take back your own time, this is a really powerful episode, and I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to the Curious Builder Podcast. I'm Mark Williams, your host. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Mel Krug from Inspire Co. Welcome, Mel.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Pretty excited. We met through Sauna Camp.
Mm-hmm.
So the Curious Builder is hosting an event in January at Lake Minnewaska, right here, probably just 5 minutes from our office, actually, where we're recording right now. And I really just want to celebrate wellness and bring our building community together and basically go through this approach that we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
The Sauna Camp individuals introduced me to you and said, I think Dr. Krug would be a great facilitator. And the way the camp is going to work, it's a half day in January where you're going to lead us through somatic breath work.
Oh yeah.
And then we're going to go into the water, and I call it the Wim Hof method, or whatever method you teach us about breathing through cold exposure to regulate your breathing. And then go from cold to sauna and back several times, have a meal together. And that's really the short version. I want to dive into it because I don't really know what somatic breath work other than I'm really open to anything. And then maybe towards the end of the podcast, we'll talk more specifically about your business, how it operates. But right now, since a lot of people have asked me, what is Sauna Camp? I want to bring you on and talk about it. So why don't you tell us just briefly who you are, what you do, and then let's go into how you facilitate this, because you've done it for other business retreats as well.
Yep. Thank you. Honored to be here to serve your community. So as Mark said, somatic breath work, it's a way of connecting with not only your breath, but your body. Somatic, at the core of the word, means body, soma. And for those of you who maybe don't know, I am a chiropractor, and a lot of people don't understand that your nervous system is at the foundation of how we regulate our breathing. It's one of the only functions in our body that we have both conscious and subconscious control of. And that all comes back to our nervous system. So I actually became a breathwork expert because I first started as a nervous system spinal expert. So that's my day job. And on the side, I work with a lot of healers, leaders, and entrepreneurs of helping them be embodied in their entrepreneurial journey. And a lot of that is teaching them how to breathe, because if you're not breathing correctly, if you're not breathing fully in your body, your brain goes into these fight or flight modes, and we're not able to function, do our daily tasks, run our businesses, navigate our teams. So during Sauna Camp, I'm going to teach y'all how to really dive into your body using your breath, using connection to your body. It's more than just breathing, y'all. It's a total body, mind, spirit experience. So
it's really interesting because a lot of people, and I'm pretty open to, they use the word, it's like, I'm very open to that. And I think of all the things that we do as humans that we're not even aware of that already do, I would imagine, some breath work. So like exercise, I'm a huge proponent of exercise, but like if you're sprinting or exercising deeply, you are inhaling your lungs to a full degree. And I know exercise does a lot of other things like cycle blood through, but your lungs are an incredible thing. And I recently had someone on from Eversphere, Jonathan Kramer. We were talking about that we spend 90% of our life indoors, which I was blown away by that statistic.
Yeah.
And we were talking about indoor air quality. And I marvel at our lungs.
Yeah.
And I don't think we spend enough time in the construction industry talking about air quality. That's going to be a separate podcast. But in some ways, our lungs are the HVAC systems of a home.
That's a very
And so
great
I'm
analogy.
curious, I've had great success with just through exercise or being aware of your body by breathing, how you feel. Walk us through a little bit about what is, it's going to be a half hour, 40 minutes before we go into the water. What are you going to teach us that we can use that quickly to sort of combat the fight or flight, I assume, of being in cold water.
Yep.
And how does that translate to, business situations and stressful situations?
Yeah. So one of the first things that changes when we become stressed, right? And stress isn't necessarily a good, bad thing. It is what it is. There's distress and there's eustress. And one of the first things that happens when our nervous system perceives that there's a threat, whether it's a true saber-tooth tiger or maybe it's an angry email from a client, our breathing changes. Instead of breathing low and slow and feeling relaxed and at ease in your system, your breath goes high. And so first, I'm going to start with, okay, why does this happen? How does this happen? And how do we start to change our breath patterns in our body to come back to that state of ease and balance? And one of the things that people don't understand with something like somatic breath work or even holotropic, or you guys have heard of Wim Hof, right? Is it's increasing your capacity for stress. We call it widening the window of tolerance. I don't know if you've heard that, but it's a somatic practice where really what people don't understand is with breath work, it's not about oxygen deprivation. It's about increasing your tolerance to the carbon dioxide. And so I'm going to teach you all how to expand your capacity in your body to deal with a little bit of discomfort so that by the time you get into the water, you're already going to be there. You're going to have expanded your window of tolerance. You're going to feel connected to your body and increase blood flow, increase oxygen to the brain, where going into the water is a hormetic stress, right? And when we say water, you guys, it's going to be very, very cold. So going into that, you're already going to be connected to your body, where we're teaching your nervous system how to deal with stress even better. And so the breath work I'll guide you through is going to be preparing you for that experience so it feels less of a threat and you can sink into that discomfort. And the way that I see that translate to business, Mark, is how many times are we maybe putting out fires or dealing with challenging clients, or in the building industry, I'm sure you guys are putting out fires a lot. Sometimes things don't go as planned. And as much as you can meditate on that, the first thing that's going to change is your breath. So what if you could regulate your breath in your body when those things show up on your day-to-day basis in your business, with your team, et cetera?
It's funny, I have 3 small children, and my middle one, Simon, tends to be more prone to anxiety as well as just flying off the handle within reason. But I often will tell him, like, Simon, breathe through your nose. And he's like, 'cause I'm trying to slow his breathing down. Right? And he's a child, so he doesn't really listen. But I think of, as adults, I think the first step is realizing your stress.
Exactly.
Because I want to talk a little bit about the actual practical application of what you're talking about. But let's take a step back. How does one know that they're stressed? Obviously, walking into cold water, we know it, we're seeing it. It's almost, we almost like psychologically psych ourselves out by going into it. So we're aware of it in a different way. But I think a lot of times you've ever been at the end of the day or you get off a call and you sweated out your shirt because you were stressed. You didn't realize it. Or you come home and like you sit down and like your body literally, you can feel your shoulders like come down and you didn't realize you were even holding on to tension. And so how would one even know to use the breath work if they can't identify if they're even stressed?
That is a fantastic question. So a lot of it is subconscious. And the more that you become connected and aware of, your body's going to start to give you cues, because your body and your nervous system is intelligent. It's always trying to keep you in equilibrium, homeostasis, right? So the first feedback loop you're going to get is often some physical symptom. It could be tension in your body. It could be tension in your chest. For everyone, it's different. For me, I often feel this little bit of tension in my lower neck. For some people, it's their gut. They get, gut dysbiosis. For other people, it's a headache. But the first feedback loop that you are more in the distress state than the eustress is a physical component.
What do those 2 words mean? I'm not familiar with those.
So eustress is good stress. So stress that helps you grow. You've probably heard of post-traumatic stress syndrome. Well, there's also post-traumatic growth. And so eustress is positive stress. So like working out, hormetic stress, like going into the sauna, going into the cold plunge, as long as your heart rate variability is balanced, which we can talk about that. But eustress is what helps your body build. The ability to navigate challenges in a way that's aligned with your vision and your mission. Distress is where your brain perceives, this is bad, I can't tolerate this, and we shut down and we collapse. And so in that distress state, our body, our posture literally starts to change. So you may notice at work, your posture starts to collapse. So that's one thing, is like, oh, wow, I'm slumping. My shoulders are forward. My heart's closed off. My neck is forward. So even repositioning to open up your diaphragm, that's number 1. Number 2, you might notice symptoms in your body like pain, tension, all the way to headaches, migraines. Maybe you're not sleeping a lot. If you don't listen to the physiology, then it starts to become emotional. And so when you notice emotionality, specifically, maybe you're snapping more, you're snapping at your kids, you're angry with your clients, you're not in that state of harmony. And maybe for me, I get a little frustrated. I get angry and maybe I'm less relaxed or patient with my clients. And so that's another feedback loop where you're like, oh, I'm being a little jerk right now. So first is physiology. And then second is emotionality. And then eventually it can get big. The big catastrophic events that happen is really feedback loop saying, hey, you're out of balance. You're stressed out in your life.
So 2 quick thoughts on that. One is at the end of the evening, at base nature, a pretty pleasant person. Thank you, Mom, for that genetic personality disposition. Like in the evening, I'm tired.
Yeah.
I've used up a lot of my patience on my clients or just throughout the day, even if it's not. And as you get tired, I assume you have less ability to cope. That's the words I'm using. I'd love to know what it means physiologically. But then when I'm kids, to your point, you said snapping. So why do I lose my patience with a 5-year-old in the evening while they're not brushing their teeth? When I've held my patience all day long. Walk me a little bit. I know I'm not unique in that, and all parents. It's a little bit of a parent guilt thing, but I think we all,
or even partners, right?
For sure. And it's almost then the second part of this question. So it's going to be a complicated one. Is that it seems like the people we love, we have less patience for. And it's sad. There's times like I'm really close to my parents, but yet sometimes after I interact with them, my wife will say, you weren't very nice to your mom and dad. And it's funny, like it's almost where maybe someone we never have met before, we're much more polite and cordial to. And I'm not saying I'm disrespectful to my mom and dad, but it's maybe when we get really comfortable around people, we don't exercise as much patience as we do with someone. Anyway, it's a big question.
Yeah.
So
I'll start with the second half of the question because that is a nervous system phenomena where we see kids who come into my office because I'm a pediatric chiropractor and they're great with us. And then when they get home from school or they go home, they just melt down. And the reason is because they feel safe to be all of who they are. When you're brand new with someone, we have this thing called our social nervous system, which is the ability to connect with people. And when we're brand new, we want to be liked. It's part of our, primitive reflex is to be like, hey, I want to be accepted into the tribe, right? But with people who you know and who you've grown up with, you can be all the range. You can be angry, you can be kind, you can be patient, you can be mad, because at the end of the day, they're still going to love you. And so that's number one, that's part of it, whether it's kids or parents. Number two, we only have so much energy in the day to make so many decisions. And so as a business owner, if you work with or have kids, you've made so many decisions, which is energy in your brain, ATP, you've fired all these neurons. As much as we try to biohack our way into being like superheroes, you're human. And so that, your cortisol's down at the end of the day, your energy's probably lower, and you only have so much energy to adapt. And so it is, I deal with that when I have a stressful day at the office. I'm maybe not as patient with my husband, and we just get that, So it is a physiology thing, it is an energy thing, and it's a social nervous system thing. We often feel like we can be all of ourselves with people who at the end of the day are going to love us regardless.
Is there a way to combat that towards the end of the day?
Stop focusing on low priority tasks. And I'm sure you get this. I know it's hard when you're first in business, but if you can delegate low priority tasks and stay in what I call your zone of genius, which breathwork can help you access that, you're not going to feel exhausted at the end of the day. You're going to be able to focus on things that inspire you rather than things that de-spire you. And I work with a lot of entrepreneurs who are in startup mode, as I call it. And sometimes you are the one woman or one man show, and you're doing a bunch of things that maybe aren't inspiring to you. And so if you're focusing on things that don't inspire you to your vision and your mission, you're naturally going to get depleted. And like I said, you only have so much energy in the tank at the end of the day. So I would offer to entrepreneurs, if there's a way that you can learn to love what you do through delegation, even if it's the small things, maybe it's not super costly, but get rid of the stuff that doesn't actually matter so that you do have more energy reserves in the tank at the end of the day. And I would say, take breaks, go for walks, do a 2-minute breathwork exercise, fill up your cup. Something I do between coaching calls is I go on a 2-minute walk. I get some sunshine. I reset my nervous system. I get out into nature. And that, I think, makes me less of a jerk to my husband at the end of the day.
That's great advice. What about, I'm blanking on the deal. There was a great little quippy little limerick for it too, but basically it was like fast action response is 5 deep breaths. Sometimes like I pull into the garage and I know as soon as I go in and I'm really excited, the kids are going to bombard me, which I actually really enjoy. But the point of it is a lot of time business owners, we're taking all of our busy day into the home, and it's hard to, sometimes a commute actually helps. I know some people that live really, like I would love to live 5 minutes away from home, either to work more efficiently or be able to run to the office or things like that. I'm about a half hour each way. However, that does allow for some decompression time. It's not all bad. But where I'm going with this is if you went into the garage, like taking 5 really deep breaths
Yeah.
before you go in. What would a practice like that do? It's a very simple thing.
Super simple. And I love that. I love that strategy, Mark. And I would say if you want to get really specific, in through the nose, out through the mouth, exhale longer than your inhale. That specific type of breath work is going to activate what's called your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the part of you that's rest, digest, balanced, at ease. In through the nose, out through the mouth also tells your body you're safe. And it's really wise to do that between transitions. So from the car to the house, or from the house back to the car in the morning. Our nervous system does well when we have those moments to be present in the moment of transition versus just thing to thing to thing to thing. I got to go to the sports and now I got to go to the grocery store. It's like pause, breathe, reset. Even that 2 minutes is going to help you feel more balanced, more regulated, and be able to respond rather than react. But it's those transition moments that can make all the difference, even if it's 2 breaths, in through the nose, out through the mouth. Game changer.
Lake Society magazine is Minneapolis' premier target market boutique lifestyle and design publication. It embodies the unique lifestyles and design of the Minneapolis City Lakes neighborhoods. From Lake of the Isles to Lake Harriet, it showcases the best in local design projects by both premier builders, architects, and interior designers in this area. Lake Society magazine has the look and feel of a national publication with glossy covers, high-end finishes. It's mailed directly to upper bracket single-family homeowners in the City Lakes area, and it's the perfect local coffee tabletop publication. Subscriptions can also be available through the website lakesocietymagazine.com. Additionally, publisher and founder Karen Steckel has over 27 years in the local magazine publishing industry and has a passion for high-end photography and quality graphics. Her commitment to quality, visual simplicity, and beauty are strongly reflected in her beautiful Lake Society magazine.
This episode is brought to you by Pella Northland. For 20 years, I've been using Pella windows, and I couldn't be happier to call them as a business partner, a trade partner, and someone that really supports us in our quality builds. We use wood windows and doors on every single one of our homes, and 98% of every home that I've ever built has been a Pella window. I've gotten to know their team here locally as well as nationally, and the way that they support us as a craftsman, as well as they support our homeowners with their lifelong guarantee, has actually been a game changer for me. So when people ask me who I use, I recommend Pella. If you want to hear more about Pella's story, you can listen to episode 1, where I interview Peter and Ed from Pella Northland about their journey into the Pella ownership. With children, what could, I'm thinking like now I'm going to start, maybe I'll even put a reminder on my phone until I make a habit of it, but I'll do it tonight when I go into the garage.
Yeah.
And how would you also, and I've done it a number of times before I go into a distressful meeting.
Yeah.
I've mentioned this a number of times on the podcast. It's a verse in Proverbs where it says, a soft answer turneth away wrath. And what I do is to frame that in my mind. Sometimes if I'm going to go into a contentious situation with a client or just a difficult situation, I think that like if you lead with softness, this is a mental manifestation of the physical thing that you're telling us to do. I think I often, not even thinking about it, when I think of that verse, it causes me to take a deep breath and just like before I get out of the car, I'm usually only doing one, I'll just be like, one really big breath, and then I get out the door. I guess I got to do 5 now. I got to come up with 4 more verses to go with those breaths.
One can be good. One can be good.
I guess where I'm going with this question is, what are some simple things we can teach others so that I'm very open to it, personality based, but for kids, obviously as a parent standpoint, what are some simple things I could teach my kids that would have an impact? And then after this, I want to talk about, as business owners, are there ways that we can help our employees and our subcontractors without telling them, or they're like, okay, what is this guy talking about here?
Yeah. I love that you asked that, because that's a big thing we teach parents in the office. And it's that you are the master co-regulator of your family unit. And what that means is, depending on the age of your kids, they're going to learn from your behavior. And so the teaching comes through mimicking rather than actually verbally telling them something. Again, depending on the age, maybe if they're above the age of 10, you can have a little bit more dialogue. But kids are going to pick up on your energy. And that's not a woo-woo concept. They tune into your nervous system. And so if you're in a state of balance and regulation, their nervous system is going to feel that, because generally in the first five years of life through development, they are learning and picking up. I'm sure you parents know, they say things you're like, wait, you heard that?
Right. Totally.
And so it's more than just a conscious thing. It is a subconscious thing, and their nervous system is going to feel regulated the more that you feel regulated. So depending on the age, I would say 0 to 5, there's nothing necessarily to tell and teach. It's more embody the behavior that you want your kids to start to embody, and they're going to start to pick that up. And then eventually as you get older, we teach older kids like, hey, put your hands on your heart, or where do you feel discomfort? Okay, hands here, breathe into that. What's that like to breathe in and connect with your body? And kids get it so quickly. I
They're
think
more open. They're more open for one thing, right?
And I think that this should be curriculum in the educational system, honestly. Like most of the time, again, before the age of 5, kids are way more somatic. They're way more in their body than they are in their head. And I think we try to force kids to get so cerebral, but then they don't feel safe in their body. So back to your question, the more that you as the parent or the leader, the more that you can regulate yourself, emotional mastery, mental mastery, right? The more people around you are going to start to pick up on that. So it's less of like telling them and more just embodying it yourself, which I think is way easier.
I mean, it goes back to a basic principle: live what you preach.
Exactly.
So
Thank you.
I think that's interesting because I have tried specifically with children, like when they're out of control or they're sick, or they recently, for whatever reason, I tell my kids they must be sweet like honey, because all 3 of my kids have been stung by bees lately and they've just completely lost their mind.
Yep.
And so I'm trying to be like, and so you're right, because they're not listening. So I'm doing the action, like breathe. Now they're not, I get frustrated because they're not actually doing what I'm trying to do. But that's helpful to know that if you just embody and practice it. And you're right. I'm thinking now from a business standpoint, there are several business owners that I really appreciate that are just very calm, and they walk into a room and you just feel it's like chamomile tea. You just feel like it just relaxes.
Right.
So anyway, that's something for me to think about. Going back to going into the water, or actually before we go back to the sauna camp and some of those tricks that we're going to talk about. Well, I'm sorry, what were the 2 types of stresses? The positive stress and the negative stress?
Eustress.
Eustress.
So literally EU stress, and then distress.
Okay.
So that's when people say, oh, I'm so stressed. It's like, well,
which one?
Not all stress is bad.
Well, because what I was going to go with this is like, or sometimes when I'm stressed, I'll tell my wife like, hey, when I get home, I've got to go for a run.
Yeah.
And it's like you feel that stress. And obviously having been a lifelong athlete, like I know that if I go for a run, I didn't realize that I was combating the negative stress with positive stress.
Yeah, you're balancing it out.
And so that's a coping mechanism without realizing it.
You're transforming the energy, right? So if you have, let's say, built up muscle tension in your body from the day, which is why I'm a huge proponent of don't sit at your desk for 8 hours. I listened to this research study where 2 minutes every half an hour is better than sitting for 8 hours and waiting for an hour of movement at the end of the day. So 2 minutes every half an hour, because what happens is as we sit, human beings are not designed to sit. They say it's the, smoke into the spine as chiropractor. As we sit, we build up energy and store tension in our body. When we're navigating things in the computer, we're seeing things rapidly through our visual system. And so as that tension builds in our muscles, that energy has to go somewhere. So that's why sometimes when you get home, you're like, man, I just need to go for a walk, or I just want to go for a run, because you're transforming the distress into eustress. And we call that a nervous system discharge, meaning you're moving the energy that's bound in your musculature, which that's what you're going to start to feel when we do the somatic breath work. You're going to feel all these sensory changes in your body because it's moving energy. And I don't mean woo-woo energy. It's ATP, it's tension in the muscles, it's tension in your fascia. So we'll get into that at sauna camp.
I mean, that's really interesting because I think in the construction field, now as an owner, I'm not doing work in the field,
right,
but a lot of, obviously, we can't build a house without someone actually swinging a hammer or
literally
moving. So,
yeah.
But it is interesting because it's one of the things that we talk a lot about business ownership. And I think a lot of people that listen to the podcast own businesses. I don't know how many of them are strapping on the bags, as they say, to do the actual work. But I would say our field is probably more prone to activity and movement than a lot of others, because we're on job sites, we're doing walks. And I think, it's just more of an observation that I think the construction field, even if you are not doing the physical work, you probably are moving more so than a lot of other
A lot of
businesses.
office workers. Yeah. So there's benefits to that for
Yeah,
sure.
for sure. And you're outside.
Yep.
Obviously, sometimes you're outside when you don't want to be. It's really
It's
hot
raining.
in the summer. Or I have a buddy of mine down in Arizona, and I always give him crap because
Oof.
it's 120 degrees. And
Yeah.
it's, it sounds terrible.
Yeah, no.
And up here, it gets negative 20. So it's like,
Yeah.
man, I'd rather put on clothes. You can only derobe so
Yes,
far on a
that's
robe.
true.
So
That's
anyway,
true.
you'll melt. Back to sauna camps. We're talking a little bit about the business application of it, or just really
Mhm.
understanding our bodies to decouple stress and how to combat it. So water is so interesting. And I've done, there's a cold plunge at our club. And so I've done it enough, but not to know, I just know that when you sit in it and you like, once you make it past the first minute or two, like it becomes really easy. Now,
Yeah.
lake cold is obviously a whole nother level
yeah,
than
especially
like
in
a
January.
cold tub. Yeah, in January it's going to be cold, and it's less about time
Yep.
than it is. I think sometimes people think that it's really this machismo thing. You got to who lasts the longest. It's not really about that.
Yeah.
It's really about regulating, and it's like this
Yes.
deep breathing and I don't know how to explain it. It's your mind is trying to tell you to quit.
Yeah.
And I always laugh because there's a clock at the cold tub. And if there's someone else I'm talking to, it's so easy to stay in the cold tub.
Yeah.
But if I'm alone and I'm looking at that clock, I mean, it looks like a sundial. It's
forever.
taken forever. I'm like, man, it's only about 1 minute. It's been in here. But as soon as you make it past 2 minutes,
Yeah.
I mean, 5 minutes is not that big of a deal.
Yep.
7 minutes. Anyway, why is it that our brain and our body are so disconnected? And why after those first couple of minutes do we sort of regulate and become sort of synergetic?
Great question. So when you go into cold water, and usually it's anything below 55, and I know 55 is cold, but you don't need 35-degree water. 55 or below is great, but you're intentionally putting yourself in a fight or flight situation, specifically activating the vagus nerve, which comes from your upper neck and goes all the way down to your core. So for those of you who have never done a cold plunge, you don't need to go all the way up to your neck. You can simply even go up to your belly button. Your vagus nerve is going to sense that cold stimulus. And what happens is we're shunting blood from our extremities all the way to our core because our body says, whoa, this is way too cold. And we literally are going into a little bit of a freak out mode intentionally. And so we recognize, okay, we're not going to die. There's no saber-toothed tiger. There's no bear to run from. And so if we're choosing to put ourselves in that distress, it gives us an opportunity to regulate our breathing rather than like, right? If you do that, you're going to be out.
You're
hyperventilating.
hyperventilating. So that's
exactly.
So let's just walk us through that for a second.
Yep.
Let's say you do that.
Yep.
What happens? Like what's happening to your body and your mind?
In that moment, as you're in so this motion, and if you guys are watching the camera, I'm raising my shoulders, I'm widening my eyes, and I'm inhaling through the mouth. That's a flight response, meaning, oh my gosh, this is a stressor. I need to run away. Okay. Now, when we stay in the distress and we choose to breathe through our nose, that activates more of a healthy fight response. And not that you're like, I'm going to fight through the water, but like, I'm going to stay present. Like, I've got this, right? So rather than, oh my gosh, right? And maybe you've had those moments in business.
It's funny. I'm just thinking because we're coming up on Halloween,
Yeah.
thinking about like horror,
Yeah,
right? Like
exactly.
like the gasp is,
Yes.
it's a gasp.
So as we inhale through the mouth, what's physiologically happening is your brain is perceiving threat. If we break this down micro moment to micro moment, your brain is perceiving stress. When we inhale through the mouth, it's the largest amount of oxygen that we can take in because oxygen is at the core of our survival, cellular respiration. So if your body is perceiving, oh my gosh, I'm going to die, you're not going to die, I promise you. We won't let that happen at sauna camp. I'm going to die. I need energy now to run away from this threat. Now, it's not a true threat though, because we can stay in cold water for a decent amount of time as human beings. We've got enough adipose tissue, we've got enough blood flow. So in that, right, our body goes into hyperactivation. It goes into sympathetic response, fight or flight. And then you realize, okay, this is uncomfortable, but I've got it. Now, if you're approaching a bear, you better flight and run. Like you want to be able to do that. But then I bridge the gap here where I'm like, how many moments in your life or in business are you having these mini like, oh my gosh, like the client didn't follow through, or like we didn't make the sale, or like, whatever, this person is uncomfortable with the way I've responded to this email, right? And so in that moment, we're taking in oxygen, we're kind of activated, our eyes get wide. I'm sure we'll see that happen to some people. And in that moment, you have a choice. And as a human being, we're not rodents, right? We have choice in our prefrontal cortex. You can choose to stay in it. And then you're like, oh, wait, it's all good. This is uncomfortable, but it's all good. So hopefully that helps like break it down.
No,
for the
I think
listeners.
this is fascinating. I don't know if
Yeah.
anyone's still listening, but I could talk I could talk about this for hours. This is really fascinating to me. So related to, and I should actually probably watch some more stuff of his stuff. So Wim Hof has essentially made a lot of these ancient practices very famous just because of his ability. For those that aren't familiar with Wim Hof, I mean, my limited knowledge is basically he's made very popular Iceman. I mean, you can go into a cold river for incredible amounts of time. I've heard that he can actually raise his core body temperature. I mean, it's just really fascinating. So let's go back to the water. So you're in the water, you're breathing, you're basically just regulating your body. And so then you get out, you go in the sauna. So now that we're in the sauna, it's this relaxing feeling. Of course, we feel warm, but then you start to get hot. After a while, you actually kind of want to go back in the cold because so walk us through the heat, like why a sauna. I mean, sauna's having its moment right now. I'd say for the last 4 or 5 years,
popping.
It's just everyone and especially being in Minnesota, we have a strong Finnish culture as well. But I feel like just in general, I mean, I have people all over the country that don't have the cold, and they're cold tubs and saunas are definitely having their moment. And we see it in the home space. I mean, as home designers, we are obviously asking these questions to our homeowners, and it's becoming more and more common that a sauna and or a cold tub is making into home design. So I think it's important for us to obviously understand this, not only from a personal level, but also from a health and wellness, but also from a designer standpoint, because our clients are asking for it.
Totally.
So going into the sauna, what's happening?
So let's say you've done, and by the way, as Mark said, you don't need to be like Wim Hof and stay in there for an hour. They say anything over 11 minutes a week can often cause more damage unless you're Wim Hof and you've done years of training. So all the blood has gone to your core, right? And that's an intelligent response to the cold because it wants to protect your vital organs and glands. Your heart is more important than your fingers, right? So now you've hit that point, you come back into the sauna and your internal core temperature starts to heat up, which you're like, okay, this feels really good. By the way, we're warm-blooded animals. I think most of us learned that in school, right? So we do way better in warmth than we do in really, really cold. So as our core temperature starts to heat up, blood flow starts to get back to the extremities to a point where now we're tipping it over the edge the opposite way, where this is a same but different experience of hormetic stress. So hormetic stress, for those of you who don't know, is stress that helps you grow. It's like the eustress, right? So as our core temperature increases, our body starts to sweat, which is an intelligent response because, again, all of this is equilibrium. If we didn't sweat, we would overheat and die. So the sweat is an intelligent response. Some of you, if you choose to stay in the water a little bit longer, you might start shivering. The shivering is actually, a lot of people say try to get to that point because it's your body trying to heat up your core temperature. It's uncomfortable, but it's your body's intelligent response. So back in the sauna, then we start to sweat. You're going to hit that threshold. Everyone's going to have a different threshold. I recommend breathing in the sauna too, maybe less through your mouth if you can, because that's not going to feel really good on your mouth with the heat, but in through your nose, because again, all of it is telling your body, hey, this is uncomfortable and I can stay with it. Hey, this is uncomfortable and I can stay with it. So we've got the blood pumping almost to a point where it's not too much, but your body starts to sweat. Your body starts to, say, okay, now I got to cool down. And like you said, Mark, you almost crave the cold. I know I do. I just did sauna cold plunge last night and I'm like, okay, I got to go dip in the cold. And then it's cool because I am sure you noticed this, that second time I go into the cold, I'm able to stay longer.
Oh, way longer.
And then I'm able to stay longer. So
obviously, and we won't dive into the practices of a Joe Rogan or whoever, a lot of people will go into the cold first, which is talk about mental discipline. I'm more of a wimp. To me, I would rather go in the sauna and get really hot and then go in. And you're right. The more you do it, the easier it gets on both fronts. And then I think it's also, you mentioned, I'd heard that 11 minutes a week was enough as well.
I think there was a Huberman lab. Like they've done actual research where over 11 minutes, it doesn't have any more benefits. So if y'all I go a couple times a week, so I might be in the cold 1 to 3 minutes every session I go throughout the week. And I don't know how much time we have today, but something to monitor is your heart rate variability, your HRV, which is basically your adaptability. So if you've heard of these like Whoop bands and I've got the Oura Ring.
6 years.
Yep. And so if your HRV is low, it's actually recommended that you don't go into the cold, but just the warmth. So that will be something for people to understand. And you don't need to track it before you come to sauna camp, but and especially as women, we have different cycles, we have different rhythms. And so that's important to know as well. But maybe that's for a different podcast.
Oh, that sounds fascinating, actually. This episode is brought to you by Adaptive. For over 2 years now, I've been using Adaptive. It's an incredible game changer. It's AI technology based. It helps you with bill pay. And as a builder, there's very few things that anger our subs more than not being paid on time. Well, those days are gone. Not only do you know exactly where you are, but you can pay people through your ACH channels, making draws extremely quick. With one click of a button, which used to take hours, my office staff is now able to generate a draw to the bank or to the client in literally seconds. The thing that I appreciate the most about Adaptive is their ability to keep changing. We've given them 3 or 4 feedbacks on things that we need as builders, and within just a few months, they're rolling those things out. This is saving us hours per week and days per month in terms of our efficiency. If you're looking to upgrade your business, I'd highly recommend Adaptive. You can reach out to them at adaptive.com or listen to the Curious Builder Podcast, episode 15 or episode 80, where we dive into their origin story. I just finished my first 50-mile ultramarathon.
Congrats. Wow.
And I've noticed that for how much I run, I feel like my HRV number should be much higher.
Right.
And so it's interesting because I think a lot of us, we look at stats, or let's say Whoop or Garmin or whatever you're looking at, is if the numbers favor what you want to do, you're like, great.
Mm-hmm.
And I've come to the point, like if my recovery says I'm at 26%, I'm like, I'm still going to do a 5-mile run today. I don't care what it says. So it's like you take the good and you leave the bad.
Yeah.
But like the HRV, I'm actually like in a 3-week low of our HRV, and I've been sick.
Yeah.
Which obviously is a huge impact.
Totally.
And I don't know if it's a mild strain of COVID that I had a couple of weeks ago. I was actually up in the Boundary Waters shivering, and the whole chills thing which was great. But I've noticed just looking at it, like if I sauna, I'll see like a 20% boosted recovery.
Yep.
I haven't noticed, because I know like obviously cold fights inflammation.
Yep.
And I know from let's say just because of all the running I did this summer, after a long run, or let's say I do a 20, 30 mile run, I'll go find time to get into a cold tub that time just to try to get out soreness. But I was talking to some bodybuilders in the gym, and actually the opposite is true. There's a spike in testosterone if you go in the cold tub before you lift, because they want inflammation for muscle building. It sounds funny, but it's flexing your muscle is inflammation. But have you heard that as well?
Yeah, I actually did bodybuilding for a year. Yeah. And they recommend doing the cold plunge before and not after, because you've pumped all this blood flow into your muscles. And so if you go into the cold plunge right away, which may feel really good, you're actually taking away all that nutrient dense blood that you've pumped into the muscles when you go into the cold plunge, because it's going to go all to your viscera. They say wait about 3 hours if you're going to do a cold plunge after you do like a bodybuilding session or more weight training, to go into a cold plunge. But sauna would be great because, again, you are pumping blood into your muscles, and it is a form of inflammation. But again, not all inflammation is bad.
Right. It's
more of, we want the ratio, right? You guys have probably heard, well, maybe you haven't, but 6-to-1 ratio. We've got omega-3 fatty acids, which are anti-inflammatory, good fats, and then your omega-6s, which are the pro-inflammatory. So you want 1 to 6, essentially 3 to 6 omega-3s to omega-6s.
Are you so maybe we'll close the conversation of this part of it and transfer to more of the business side. I think this is fascinating. And I know a lot of builders that listen, they do exercise. One of the things that I want, maybe able to speak to why I'm doing the sauna camp. So other than I've often used myself as a litmus test of if I like it, maybe someone else will. And if they don't, then I guess they don't. We have this thing called these Curious Collectives. So we have one for builders, we have one for designers, we have one for architects. We're going to launch one for trades here next year as well. And my dream is that that sauna camp can hold up to 60 people. I think we've got 10 registered, but we're still 4 or 5 months away. Lots of time to sign up. But the whole goal of it is I would love for just the collectives to be there and create this community of people, because not everyone's going to want to do this. I hope people listening are willing to stretch themselves a little bit and do something new. And I just love, even as a kid, it's funny how so many things come back to you. But I had my dad on the podcast a year ago. I'm going to bring my mom on because she was an interior designer. But she used to always say, broaden your horizons. And I think as a society, as a business owners, just being open to different things. Maybe this isn't for you. That's fine. Just try it. And if you don't like it, great, don't do it again. But the goal is to have all these business owners, and maybe you're talking about business, maybe you're talking about life. And I feel like building is such a male dominated industry. I love seeing more and more women get into it, because I feel like it opens up this predominantly male culture to just being more open. And shocker, all of our clients are women. If you can't relate to women, like you're probably not going to be a very successful business owner, especially in the construction world, much less life. And so I just feel, I don't know, I just want to get the community of, I just love getting people together to try new things. And so I'm hoping that the sauna camp, actually the majority of people that have signed up so far are not even from the state. They're
amazing.
flying in from Georgia. I've got someone coming from Arizona, someone from Colorado, someone from Canada. I'm like, wow, this is amazing. I did not anticipate that many people would fly in for this, and I'm flattered about it. And then we're doing in May, we haven't talked a lot about it. It is available. It's called Boot Camp. And basically we're going out to Zion National Park for 3 days. And this, I was really inspired because every year I go to the Boundary Waters, or I try to do a camping trip with no phones, just get away. Because I find as business owners, you need to check out to check back in. And I feel like sometimes you need to force people. It's like a little bird. You got to kick them out of the nest in order for them to fly. And I feel if I can help people realize how helpful that is, there's only room for 20 people. You get off the airplane, you have to check in your phone. So there's no phones. I'm going to put it in a plastic box. We'll have one emergency contact at the camp, and then no alcohol. And basically we're going to do hikes. Those that want to run can run. We're going to have some group physical activities. We're going to have some positive stress, and then just time with other business owners. And I feel like being away from constantly checking your pocket for that phone is more helpful than people. It seems like a simple thing, but honestly, I ran with someone the other day, and they said that last weekend they actually turned their phone off, left it in a drawer for a whole day, just one day. And they were just like, I can't believe at how de-stressing it was. And so anyway, it's things like this that I feel like as business owners, yes, we're in the construction field, but we're business owners. We're entrepreneurs that happen to build. We need these types of things. Just be our best self.
Reset, right? Yeah, I'm all about that.
Now, tell us a little bit more. Let's switch to the business side. Inspire Co. It sounds like you're doing some retreats as well.
Yeah, I've been doing retreats now for a number of years. And I like to say, the word retreat means to run away. And like you, Mark, I'm big into okay, rather than escaping and just having a spa day, which I think is important, really face yourself, put the phone away and say, okay, how am I doing life? And yes, rejuvenate, reset, but look at what are some patterns in your life that you feel like you're ready to complete and be done with. And I think sometimes we have to pattern interrupt our own life and get out of the whatever this is and come over here and to have that reset and say, okay, how can I create from this space, and not just run away, but really face what's going on internally, what's happening in your life that maybe is something you can start to let go of and start to build that capacity from within. So I've been doing, I call them Inspire immersion experiences. And we've done ones for 1 day. We've done ones for 4 days. I've taken a group to Costa Rica for 7 days. And it's a really great time to just learn about yourself. And like you said, reset and refocus. And I tell people, hey, put your phones away, right? Connect with you. Your body, it has the best technology you need. And I think we forget that when we get caught up in the daily grind and, working with clients and as business owners. So it's really nice to come back to you are the center of your life. So why not take care of you? Even if it's once a quarter or once a year, you do these things. And I was actually looking at your retreat online, and I was like, this looks amazing.
I think you might have to come.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that at Sauna Camp. Who is being attracted to these events? Is this geared towards business owners? Anyone can come, or who are you? Because you've done it for now a couple of years.
Yeah. So
how big is the group, and what are you finding that people are saying, and why are they coming, and what are they learning?
Yeah. So I often see anywhere between 10 and 20 people. I like to keep it intimate. I think beyond that, it gets a little bit not as intimate as I'd like, but I often work with healers, leaders, and entrepreneurs. So you don't have to be a business owner, but I do actually work with a lot of other chiropractors because they're helping so many people. They're holding space for so many people. And I ask the question, who's healing the healers, right? Who's helping these people fill their cup when they're serving so many people, or they're serving their family and they feel like they don't have time for themselves? So number one, it's time for you, right? Time for you to get taken care of. We take a very nervous system embodied approach. So I teach a lot on what you've heard today on the podcast. I go deeper into it. I also do a lot of breakthrough and mindset coaching of how we get out of our own way. And I really like to go into the deep, what I call root experiences, which is things that have happened to us when we're younger and we don't realize how much it's blocking us. My personal story, I grew up, my parents divorced. I dealt with my own trauma and saw when I opened a business how much that really hindered me. And so I did a lot of kind of inner child work to really resolve that and become the leader I knew I was always destined to be. So we go deep into stuff, and we do a lot of breath work. We do fire ceremonies and all that
Is that
kind
where
of
you
stuff.
write something down and burn it?
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about that. I was just at a retreat recently, and some of the business owners were going through potential divorce, and life is stressful, owning a business, and stress is stress. My wife often says it's not really appropriate to compare your stress to other people's stress, because stress is stress.
Yeah.
And if I could look at it from a physical side, the guy who can run a 5-minute mile versus the guy who can run a 20-minute mile, they might both equally be putting out the same amount of effort. If you're 350 pounds, a 20-minute mile, I guarantee is not going to be easy. And if you're elite marathoner, you're running a 4:30 marathoner from Kenya, it's no joke. He's running fast, but like, I'm guessing the stress on their bodies might be,
it's all relative.
And so I think it's important not to compare our stress to other people. I think that's hard because we do often sit in a place of judgment. That doesn't stress me out. Why is it stressing you out? And then of course, and I even though I know this, I fail so many times. You're stressed out. Relax. Relax.
No.
I tell that to my wife all the time when she's stressed out. And I'm telling you right now, I'm 0 for 1 million in saying relax. But it's what I say. I'm like, and even my kids, I'm like, I don't know why I always tell people to relax when they clearly are not ready to relax.
Well, that I joke, us chiropractors, when people come in and, maybe the shoulders are really tense, and telling a practice member to relax, it's like, hello, that's why I'm here. Like, I would if I could. And that is where the breath work comes in, is to, I don't want to say hack, but I say boost that subconscious programming to rewire it and repattern it. So
let's go back, your journey into chiropractic care. So, talk to us a little bit how you started your business and how long you've been practicing, and, let's talk a little bit about the business side of things.
Yeah. So I opened Inspire Life Chiropractic Center in 2017. I did not grow up with chiropractic care. I received my first chiropractic session in my early 20s after a rugby injury. So I played rugby for 10 years. And growing up, my mom
What
was...
part of the country are you from?
Minnesota.
Are you really?
Raised. Yep, born and raised.
Oh, interesting. Because you said y'all a few times in the beginning. I thought you were going to be from the South.
No, I know people say that. And I'm like 75% Scandinavian.
Okay.
So, I did not grow up with chiropractic care. My mom was also not one to like rush us to the doctor. She's like, rub some dirt in it. You're fine. Whatever. So
relax,
chill out. Right. So, early 20s, I suffered a AC tear of my left shoulder playing rugby. And I went from feeling like I was on top of the world to feeling like I was 80 years old. Couldn't sleep laying down. Had to sleep in a recliner for 2 weeks.
Where's your AC?
Your AC is your acromioclavicular. So it's like right up here. So it connects your clavicle to your humerus.
We're going to have to talk. I fell on my road bike 3 weeks ago, and it's right up there. I know I didn't tear my rotator cuff. I got full range of motion, but it's really painful right there.
So your clavicle and your scapula and your humerus, there's a ton of little ligaments in there that connect everything together. So
do you operate on it, or do you just let it heal?
So thankfully it was a sprain. It wasn't a tear fully. So it does take time to heal for sprains, as we know. But thankfully the chiropractor helped me out. And at the same time, they said, we've done all we can. We still notice there's some stuff going on. You should go see this other chiropractor. And I said, okay. And again, I didn't know what chiropractic was. I thought it was just back pain and neck pain. So I go to this other chiropractor, and mind you, I'm playing high level rugby, which if anyone knows rugby, it's a pretty wild sport. And before he even touches my spine, he talks about the vital importance of the nervous system and getting to the core wounds and how your nervous system runs literally everything in your life. And so I start seeing this chiropractor. Mind you, I'm a college student. I'm paying cash. I'm, playing high level rugby, and just start to notice all these changes. My menstrual cycles got better. My mental, emotional health got way better. I started losing weight. Like, I used to be way heavier than I am now. And it was like the lights just turned on. And I said, whatever this is, I want to learn how to do it. And so from then I went to chiropractic school, graduated, and opened my practice 4 months later. And
well, that's amazing.
Here we are.
Wow. How big is the practice?
So I have a doctor underneath me.
Yep.
We're, for chiropractic hours, we're actually pretty part-time just because I do a lot of coaching. But we probably see anywhere between 100 and 200 visits a week.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yeah. And our style is very different. It's not 30-second in and out. It's much more of a process of care. So for the type of work that we do, we see quite a few people. Specifically, we see a lot of women. We see a lot of families. We do see a lot of like entrepreneurs, people who want to keep their human nervous system, or their, as I call it, human operating system, as optimal as possible.
Where's your office, or where do you
We're in
practice?
Mendota Heights.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, we'll have that in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
From a coaching standpoint, are you coaching those that care for others, as you mentioned, or are you coaching like people like myself, or how are you coaching?
Some of my clients do one-on-one work with me. So some of my practice members in the office who still have 9-to-5 jobs, but they just have stuff they want to work through. But I do work with a lot of entrepreneurs, specifically chiropractors or other healers, people who, again, are caring for a lot of people and they want to work. I think I've had a coach all my life since age 5. I've been an athlete. So I think coaching can just help us get out of our own way and be the unbiased, honestly, calling us out at times when we get in our own stuff. So
how stress and burnout is real. And I feel like for myself, I've talked about this on the podcast. Honestly, the podcast has been something that's helped me avoid stress and burnout. I really enjoy people. I get energy from people as a classic extrovert would, but I love listening to people's stories. I love learning. I was just talking to a builder this morning on the way in, and they asked, how has this last year been? And I'd say, from the custom home side, it's been a very rough year. We had to let a few people go last year. It's been kind of just a downtime for us specifically. However, I've had a lot of space to devote a lot of energy to the Curious Builder platform. We've got about 7 or 8 building platforms, the Sonic Camp, the Boot Camp, in just community. And I'm thriving from an emotional standpoint and a satisfaction standpoint. It's been something that's helped me sort of pivot. I've been building for 20 years. And now I feel like I've sort of armored myself up with like a clear direction. It's called the back 40, the next 20 years. What is it going to look like? And I feel much more re-energized to do so, to be there for my clients. And that's why I'm so passionate about talking about these things, because I've experienced it. What are you seeing in terms of, stress and burnout for business owners, and how can they help themselves?
Yeah, I love that you're reigniting that within yourself. I think number one, it's if you feel uninspired by what you're doing, if you feel a lack of inspiration and motivation, if you feel apathy. Big thing I see with chiropractors is because it's such a physical, giving, intimate experience. They often feel, honestly, some level of resentment towards what they're doing. And I tell people, I say, look, it may not be the core of your profession. Like, you may still truly be inspired by chiropractic as an example, but it could be the way that you're doing it. Or it could be you feel like you're people pleasing all the time and you don't know how to set boundaries. It could be that maybe you're not charging enough. Maybe you've been in practice for X amount of years and it's time to raise your prices. Like, that's okay if you become more of an expert in your field. So I always tell people, burnout is not necessarily because you don't like what you're doing, but how you're doing it and how you're structuring your day. And like you said, Mark, there's maybe ways that you can serve the building community, for example, but in a different form. And so that, I think, is part of the evolution of an entrepreneur. Is it may just be that there's a next step for you where you can take back some time and ownership and energy, where you can't be given 24 hours a day, right? You're going to lead to, like, resentment, I think, is one of the number one emotional things to become aware of that is telling you you're probably burnt out, where you don't like your clients and you don't like what you're doing. And again, it may not be what you're doing, but how you're doing it. But I would say, resentment and apathy are probably the 2 core indicators that I see.
That's interesting. I'd like to talk more about that. I've mentioned this a lot as well. And it's, there's 3 phases of your business journey. I'm sure there's lots more, but for this analogy, it's the 3, which is learn, earn, and return.
Yes.
And I joke that I missed the earning phase. I got to go back to that one. But I think for me specifically, the Curious Builder platform, it feels that I'm able to give back in a way, because you have these conversations and you see the light and the sparkle in people's eyes. Is like, oh, there's a community. Not sometimes being a business owner is a very lonely place to be.
Yeah.
And you can have great teams, and it's not that you don't share with your team. There is a certain stress that comes with having your shingle on the door and having other business owners to relate to. And sometimes I have this builder friend of mine, and he'll call me and I'll be like, do you need me to listen, or do you need me to solve your problem?
Right.
And which is funny, because I'm sure my wife wishes I had learned that 11 years ago when we were first married, because I still fail at that. It's funny how the answer, but somehow, I don't know.
We have our own patterns.
These own patterns. And I just finally figured that out with my sister. She'll call me and say, hey, I want to talk about this or whatever. And I'll say, do you want me to solve the problem, or do you just want me to listen?
That is
90% of the time, guess what she wants me to do?
Listen.
Yeah.
And
I'm a terrible listener. But anyway.
Well, I love that you said that, because I teach that to my clients. I'm like, look, your share is sacred. And just because someone is maybe, I don't want to say dumping, but just because they are expressing something doesn't mean that you necessarily have to come in and fix it and solve the problem right then and there. Honestly, majority of the world just needs to be heard and seen and acknowledged and listened to. And in that, when they feel seen and heard, everything starts to shift. But I think sometimes we get this dopamine hit of trying to be the hero and solve the problem. And it's like, I believe that humans are intelligent and they have all the answers from within them. And I think coaching just allows it to come out with the right questions. So I love that you mentioned that, because that's a big thing I teach on, is like, look,
I
you need to do
100%
that.
agree with you. I think when we are open to, when we ask for help, I've mentioned
Mhm.
this so many times and I fully believe it, that I think that the word help is the most underused word in the English language, in the sense that if you ask people for help, I've never, honestly, I can't think of a single time where I've asked someone sincerely for
Mhm.
help and not been helped.
Yeah.
And if you are the person that has asked for help, it is a powerful cape of dopamine, because you
Mhm.
get to help somebody else. And I'm talking on a human to human level
Yeah,
too. And so
totally.
working through that, it's a beautiful thing.
It is.
And I think there's a vulnerability. I think that's the key thing, is that when people can't be vulnerable or can't be authentic, or they don't even know how, or I think that's where people trip up, honestly. Because
Yeah.
I think the word, asking for help, there's things that have to happen before they get
Mhm.
to that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Vulnerability, I think I'm out to shift. That is a strength.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean you're weak. The ability to lower your armor and say, hey, I'm struggling and I'd love some support.
Mhm.
That requires so much strength and courage to ask for that.
We had a episode, it'll air, well, probably a week before this one airs, and we were out in Boston for the Contractor Coalition, and I was hosting what we called Build Buzz. So we had Morgan, Brad, Nick, and Tyler, the principals from there, and we got into some pretty personal stuff in front of the audience. And someone came up to me after, and they said the thing that we appreciated the most was when we got real about this. And so
Yeah.
that wasn't why we said it, obviously.
Right.
It just came out, and it was a really nice moment. And it's just funny, as humans, I think as business owners, we feel like we have to have it all together. And it's in social media,
Oh, yeah.
everything is marketing and your best foot forward. But honestly, we're all a hot mess, a big dumpster fire.
Right.
And I think it's really important to just talk about it. No,
Yep.
it's really hard. It's really
Yep.
struggling. In fact, we're going to come out with something at some point, because like everyone loves a good blooper reel. You watch a
Yeah.
comedy movie, and at the end, the blooper reels are just hilarious.
Yeah.
And so I need to figure out a way to do a blooper
Bloopers
reel.
like on the podcast?
Yeah,
Yep.
which, because when you do ad reads, not so much in the interview, because they tend to just be natural conversations, so you
Right.
don't have probably as many of them. But I have a couple of people that I'll send, hey, I'm doing an ad read for whatever company, and if you tell me what I have to say, I'm terrible
Yep.
at it.
Yep.
If I can just say it in my own words, obviously no problem. And so you're just like stumbling. You
Yep.
cannot get your tongue to do what it wants, and they're really quite funny.
Yep.
And so anyway, the whole point is to sort of just shine a light on kind of
Yep.
the humorous side of it all.
We all have that. We all have the
Mhm.
blooper reels in our life.
Oh, for sure. How, I think, from a work-life balance, what are some things that you've seen either in your own life or with people you coach? I'm a huge proponent of boundaries create freedom. And I
Yeah.
talk about it all the time. For me specifically, it's wake up early in the morning.
Mhm.
I'm home every day by 7 a.m. to get the kids up, get them to school. So if I'm going to work out, it has to be whatever time before that.
Yeah.
And then in the evening, I'm home every day at 5. And I've talked about this so much. I keep talking about it
Mhm.
because it's important for me to remind myself how important it is. But I
Mhm.
think it's also important to let other business owners know that you can have a successful business
Yep.
by prioritizing. It's not that you're not prioritizing work or whatever. It's just like you're creating a boundary,
Yep.
and will actually help you.
Yep.
Anyway, how have you, with the kind of that framework, how have you seen that with people that you've coached or
Mhm.
even experienced in your own life?
Time. Own your time, right? Own your day. And that's prioritizing the high priority tasks. I'm like you. I'm very regimented with my time, and for what I see in younger entrepreneurs is they have this fear of setting that boundary, because what will this other person think? Or are they going to think I'm a jerk? Or are they going to think all these things? And it's like, what if instead you perceived it this way and said, how does me setting a boundary actually serve my clients? How does me being regimented with my time and my energy and putting myself first in the beginning of the day, whether it's movement or breath work or whatever, how does that actually benefit my business? And I think the way that you do grow and scale is you've got to be so disciplined with your time, and also being disciplined with your white space on your calendar, which is for me a moment to create, where I've got nothing planned. There's no meetings, there's no clients, and I just have space to create, whether I'm out in the woods or I'm on a walk. That to me is where I get my best ideas. And I call it like the $1 million insight, right? Where something can drop in, and that's one thing that shifts the entirety of my business.
How do you practically do that? Are you actually creating time in your schedule that says like every from 2 to 5
Yep.
o'clock? You've booked it as like an appointment.
I can show you my phone right now, Mark, and I call it my zone of creation. And it actually is on Tuesdays in the afternoon because, I have a free training out there where I talk about how to align your business with your biology. And I have learned how to create my day to follow the cortisol curve. And so your cortisol is highest in the morning, which is where you're most creative or doing things like this. And then it dips and then you get a little peak between 4 and 6 and then it goes down. So I've learned how to create specifically, I kind of live and die by my Google Calendar. I put these things in, not just meetings, not just podcasts, not just client calls, but I literally put zone of creation or workflow, or I put these things like I'm going to go to yoga later today. And I'm going to treat that like a standing appointment as though it's a client and I'm not going to miss it. And I think it's so easy for entrepreneurs to just let everything pile up and not take care of you. And guess what? That's where we go back to the burnout conversation. And so I've learned how to own those times. Yes, even the white space. I literally call it zone of creation. You guys can literally look at my phone and that's what it says.
We'll get a picture of it.
Yeah.
We'll post it on it. That'll be awesome.
Put it on Instagram.
How have you, I mean, I have certain things I call it think on the business, or I tend to be a very laissez-faire thinker. Mainly it's through exercise. As I'm running or as I'm biking or whatever, I get all these ideas.
Same.
And my team knows because I call them and I'm like breathing heavily. I really need to figure out how I can trigger AI and just have AI take all my notes for me while I'm running, and then send it in a bullet list. I'm sure it's out there. I just got to work on that somehow. Anyway, where I'm going back to this is, and I don't think I'm alone in this, I have these spaces on my calendar and I do okay job, not a great job, but inevitably a client or something will come up and be like that, like, because nothing makes an entrepreneur happier than a canceled meeting. But then guess what happens? You fill it.
Yeah.
And it's like it's almost like we're airlines. We overbook our capacity by 30% and we plan on things being canceled. And if it doesn't cancel, it keeps building up. And then we have to start canceling. And I tend to prioritize communication over almost any other thing because I like, if I'm going to say something, I want to do it.
Right.
What have you seen both from yourself or from seeing other business owners? The step one is to create this time. So you create the time, but then something comes up and you just slide it in there and it just keeps sliding there. And before you know it, it shows up in your calendar, but you've never actually kept it for a year. So what's the point of it even being in your calendar?
Totally.
How do you reset that thought? How do you take that back?
Yeah. Well, I will also admit that I am not perfect, right? I think it's important to break our addiction to perfection. That's number one. Our addiction to also control, our addiction to working all the time, which it's easy to do as an entrepreneur if you get super inspired by it. But again, I think it comes back to the pattern recognition and awareness. And I probably speak to that a lot because it's so easy for me as a chiropractor and a coach. I'm looking at these patterns all the time, but I try to have a rule of 3. Like if this has happened 3 times, then, and this takes time to become even self-aware of it. But for your listeners, if you've noticed that something's happened 3 times, I start to ask like, okay, why is this happening? Where do I have responsibility in this? And I often say, okay, do I keep rescheduling because it's on this person's end? Or do I keep rescheduling because I actually don't really care about it? And that can be a hard thing to face. It's like, oh, this actually isn't. So I always filter things through my values. So knowing my top values, if something's coming in, but it's not actually being fulfilled upon, it's probably not in alignment with my values, which can be a sobering experience, but also give you your power back. So
I'm not going to have to look at my calendar again. And I mean, silly stuff. Like I'm just thinking of it, right? Yeah. Just a matter of importance. Like if it's not, if you keep avoiding it, is it really that important?
Exactly.
And, clearing out your schedule. It's interesting because I've talked to some people that are, have scaled. I haven't done a great job of scaling my business, but the one advantage of scaling your business is that you can buy back your time.
Yep.
And I think I have looked as a business owner at people the wrong way. More money, more problems, more people, more problems.
Yeah.
Kind of this concept that, now I have to go sell a couple more homes to justify their salary. And as business owners, I don't want to hire someone only to have to fire them. So it's not that you are being conscientious, but if I was thinking about it differently, is like, this person, it does something I can't do,
Yeah.
or even like you said, delegation.
Yeah.
And every time I've hired someone and then they do a great job, you're like, it relaxes me. Like,
Yes.
oh, I don't have to deal with that.
Yep.
And a good friend of mine, his company has exploded. He's at 31 people now. That's a huge company. And he's like, yeah, I didn't get a single email in the last couple of days. Or he said, he showed me his phone. He's, oh, we just hired somebody. Like, he didn't even know about it. And that seems like a very far off place for me to even be, or even if I want to go there. But I do have to say that seeing that from a balance standpoint, now you essentially replace yourself.
Totally.
And it's taken me a long time to realize that if I'm going to sell, let's say, Mark Williams Custom Homes, I'm going to have to scale it, and I'm going to have to replace myself.
Yep.
Because if you end up being the bottleneck, then you don't have an asset. You're working in the business, not on the business. And you're an employee.
Yep. You're not an owner. Yep.
Yeah.
That's a big thing I teach people is, especially chiropractors, I think they can get so much of their heart in it. And sometimes as entrepreneurs, our ego can get involved. It's like, wait, replace me. But like, I started this thing. It's like, yeah. And like, time is priceless. Do you want to have more time with your kids? You want to have more time to do this? I mean, hiring a doctor underneath me, it's allowed me to step out of the practice. I mean, I'm only in the office 11 hours a week of hands-on. And our practice does very, very well, but it's allowed me to step out and say, oh, it's not about me anymore. It's about the vision and the mission. Right. So.
Well, I appreciate you coming on. We could talk for hours.
3 hours.
Maybe in parting, I haven't asked this question in a while. In a parting, what are you excited about coming up this year? And maybe a good book or two recommendation.
What I am excited about is I have been invited to a lot more speaking engagements and facilitator engagements. I've been working really hard to up-level my game there. And I'm actually having people reach out from other countries to have me teach them, what I'm doing, which is really cool, which means my mission and vision is going from countryside to international, which is really cool because I do have a mission of, touching the lives of people in all different countries and all different continents. So that's happening specifically on my YouTube channel, which it's funny how you put stuff out and where it lands is I'm sure you've experienced. Books, gosh, I have been on my own personal healing journey. Right now I am reading The Reclaimed Woman. And I know you mentioned connecting with women, Mark. So for those of you who, I don't think you have to be a woman to read it, but it's very powerful to connect to the feminine side. Dr. Kelly Brogan, she's a doctor, she's an entrepreneur, and she talks about the masculine and the feminine energy in the dynamics of relationships and all of that. And then, I've been really liking Alex Hormozy's stuff. So I don't know if you know.
I'm not familiar with him.
Oh, Alex Hormozy, if you want business,
okay,
don't listen to anyone else but him. No. He's got $1 million offers and $1 million leads. And it's the most basic stuff in business, but it just makes sense. So right now I'm working through his $1 million offers.
So you said $1 million offers and $1 million what?
Leads.
So
he's got 2 books, him and his wife. And their content is so simple, so basic, so human people oriented, like do good work for people and your business will grow.
And that's a book or a podcast?
He's got a podcast and he's got 2 books, which almost look like textbooks, like the business textbook you never got in undergrad.
Right.
So those are my 2 that I'm liking.
All right.
Now.
That looks like I got some reading. It's funny. I keep asking this question and my list of things, I'm going to have to go on a year sabbatical just to get through all the books and whatever. I will have everything in the show notes for people that want to reach out to you. Obviously, if they want to meet you in person, we'd love for them to attend sauna camp and you can be our facilitator. Are you going to be in the sauna as well with us?
Oh yeah. I mean, if you want me to hang out, I'm down.
Oh, well, we got the Mediterranean meal at the end as well. So
sounds delicious.
It sounds great. Well, appreciate your time and we'll see you next week.
See ya.
Thanks for listening to the Curious Builder podcast. If you like what you listen to, please give us a 5-star rating and write us a review. It really means a lot. It's a great way for us to just understand what you like about the podcast and what we can keep doing. So like and review, and please share with your friends and family. Find out more at curiousbuilderpodcast.com.